Hey guys, welcome along to this new episode of Hellmouth Hotline. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart, and we're getting into A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. Now, I don't think that there's much middle ground for this movie at all. You're either going to love it or hate it, depending on where you stand at with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. We've got a new Freddy in this movie. Recasted, very much a darker version of Freddy. This time he's played by Jackie Earle Haley, and yes, it's I don't know. I literally watched the film this morning again, just in the preparation of recording this podcast, and you know, it's a faithful enough remake. Coming off the back of the original movie, as I say, very much a darker version of Freddy Krueger in this one. But I don't know. For me, the rewatchability factor of this movie isn't high. So I'll be curious to hear what you guys have to say about the movie as well. Jackie Earle Haley, Kyle Connor, Rooney Mara, Kitty Cassidy, Thomas Dekker, and Keelan Lutz starred in this movie. Produced by Michael Bay and Platinum Dunes. Of course, it's a remake of the 1984 film of the same name, Nightmare on Elm Street. It's set in a fictitious town in Ohio and centres around a group of teenagers living on one street, of course, Elm Street, and they're stalked and murdered in their dreams by Freddy Krueger. The teenagers discover they all share a common link from their childhood that makes them targets for Freddy. There's a few differences in this movie. Like the kids in this one, we find out eventually that they were all in a kindergarten as kids, and Freddy Krueger was like the gardener there, and he molested the children. That's the big difference in Freddy in this movie. Just going by what I'm picking up online here, I'm just looking up some of the stories and whatnot and records of this movie. Where are we at in my notes? They decided to remove the one line quipping Freddy out of the original movies, who had become less scary and more comical over the years. So that's fair to say. He became a bit of a celebrity through these movies towards the end, and whenever they did the last movie, where it was Wes Craven's New Nightmare, they actually played into that in a big way, of Freddy being the celebrity, and it was crossed between real life and the movie world and whatnot. And we had that sequence in there where the original Nancy has been interviewed on a talk show, and Robert Englund pops out dressed as Freddy Krueger, and he's dancing for the crowds and the audience, and you know, taking the applause of being the celebrity. So yes, they took that sort of version of Freddy Krueger out of this movie and brought it back to more of a darker nature, and they developed the character to be a child molester, and that was something that Wes Craven wanted to do originally in the 1984 film, but changed him to a child killer instead. And the appearance of Freddy is a lot different in this movie, and uses a lot of computer generated imagery to make him closer to a born victim. Yes, A Nightmare on Elm Street. This one here, it was filmed in Illinois. Craven expressed his displeasure when he was not consulted on the project, but Robert Englund, who played Freddy in the previous 8 movies, he voiced his support of the remake and the casting of Haley in the role of Freddy. But again, as I say, I don't think there's any real middle ground in this movie. You're either going to love it or absolutely hate it. maybe there is a little bit of middle ground there. I don't hate this movie, but as I say, the rewatchability factor of it isn't there for me at all. Like, I think today's viewing of this movie is probably maybe the third time that I've seen this movie, but the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies, like, I've seen them countless times. But you know, the story of this movie is fairly close to the original. At the beginning of it, there's the Springwood Diner. There's Dean Russell in there, and he falls asleep at a table, gets killed by Freddy, and in the dream, Freddy forces his hand up and cuts his throat, but in reality, Dean's cutting his own throat. But at his funeral, he's there to see a friend, to talk about what he's going through in these dreams and whatnot. But, you know, he dies very swiftly into the movie, and at his funeral, Chris sees a photograph of her and Dean as children, but cannot recall knowing Dean before high school. And she begins to have nightmares about the burnt man, and she refuses to go to sleep for fear that she will die like Dean. Jesse Braun, Chris's ex-boyfriend, shows up to keep her company while she sleeps, but she's killed in the dream, and that is very similar to the original movie, and the fact that she dies and the boyfriend gets the blame for her murder, and yes, gets arrested and whatnot, similar to the original movie. Turns out that Nancy's been having nightmares about the same man. Jesse, he is arrested on suspicion of murdering Chris and is killed by Krueger when he falls asleep in the jail cell. As his friends die, or as her friends die, I should say, Nancy questions everyone's connection to each other, given that none of them can remember each other before their teenage years. Nancy and her friend Quentin Smith discover that they attended the same preschool. Nancy's mother, Gwen, she reluctantly tells Nancy and Quentin about Krueger, the preschooler's groundskeeper, who was accused of molesting the children, including Nancy. Gwen explains that Nancy was his favourite, and that she came home one day and told her mother about the things Krueger did to her in a secret location. Yes, again, you know, it's one of these things. If you enjoy Freddy Krueger, the original one, and that kind of wisecracking version of him from the older movies, you're going to detest this version of Freddy Krueger in this movie. He is a nasty, nasty piece of work. Gwen alerted the other parents, including Quentin's father, Alan, but she tells the teenagers that Krueger escaped before he was arrested. But refusing to believe her mother's story, Nancy attempts to track down the remaining kids from the school, the preschool, but discovers that all of them have been killed in some way, shape or form. She's in the library on the net, searching people's names and finding all these reports of everybody getting killed. And following Jesse's death, only she and Quentin are left. Meanwhile, Quentin falls asleep during his swim practice and sees a flashback to his parents, led by Alan, tracking down Krueger and burning him alive. That was, I don't know, it was a weird sequence in this movie. I kind of felt that, you know, whenever he fell asleep at this particular point in the movie, they used that opportunity to not have Freddy come after him, but to give him a vision of what happened. Freddy, it kind of felt a little bit off to me. As a result of their insomnia, Nancy and Quentin have sporadic micro sleeps and become hypnagogic. That's a big word for this time of night. Basically, they wind up at that level of sleep, deprived of sleep so much that they're actually having hallucinations and you know, they're kind of dreaming at times whenever they're awake, and it's there is some genuinely, you know, really good sequences in this movie where, you know, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise was always very good at, you know, blurring the line between reality and the dream world. And at times you didn't know someone had fallen asleep until Freddy popped up. In this movie, they're fairly good at doing that too. But they get it down to a T of skipping between what's happening in the dream world and what's happening in reality. Some really good sequences there. To try and stop Krueger, they decide to go to the preschool and learn what they can. And, you know, there is a small amount of time in the movie where these two kids is like, you know, they're kind of thinking, is Freddy the nightmare evil person that they've been led to believe that he is, or was he killed? You know, the parents kill an innocent man, essentially. So there's that question hanging over their heads for a part of the movie. That Freddy is still after them to kill them, but they're kind of questioning what happened, Freddy, and, you know, what his motivations are for trying to kill the kids. And yes, but whenever they do get to the school, well, on the way to the school, Nancy's attacked by Krueger, during which she pulls a piece of Freddy's sweater out of the dream, which again is, you know, coming from the original movie as well. That was a big part of it, where Nancy in the original movie she came out of the dream and brought Freddy's hat with her. Quentin takes Nancy to the hospital. She's got these gashes on her upper arm from Freddy's glove. He steals some adrenaline to help him stay awake. Nancy and Quentin eventually make it to the preschool and uncover Krueger's hidden room to find proof of his crimes, and they realise that Krueger, now a vengeful ghost, wants revenge on them for disclosing his abuse. That's why he's coming after them in this version of A Nightmare on Elm Street. They outed him and he got killed for it, and he's coming back to take his revenge on these kids. Nancy decides to go to sleep and try and pull Krueger out of the dream world and kill him in the real world. Again, very much like the original movie. Quentin tries to stay asleep. He tries to stay awake long enough to pull Nancy out of her dream when she grabs Krueger, but he falls asleep and he's attacked by Krueger as well. And in the dream world, Krueger goes after Nancy and explains that he deliberately left her for the last so that she would become comatose, and he's going to try and keep her in the dream world for as long as possible before killing her. Quentin wakes up and he uses the adrenaline to wake Nancy, who then pulls Krueger into reality. They've got their fight at the end of the movie. Nancy uses a broken paper cutter blade to kill Freddy before she torches the room with Freddy's body inside. And you know, that's fairly disturbing whenever they discover the reality of what Freddy Krueger was and what he did to these kids whenever they were 5 or 6 years old at this preschool. There's these they find these Polaroid photographs of Nancy as a child. You don't actually, as a viewer, get to see them, but it's fairly well acted, and you see the devastation on her face whenever she realises that this guy did some nasty stuff to her as a child. Yes, and again, this is a version of Freddy Krueger that, you know, I can remember whenever this movie came out, a few of my friends really hating it because Freddy Krueger was now not just a child killer, but he was a paedophile. You know, it's just it was a line that a lot of people didn't like them crossing with this character, but it is what it is. And as I say in some of the notes there that I found, you know, this is the sort of character that Craven wanted to make Freddy back in the day, but I think he went the other way just because, I don't know, back in the early 80s, it might have been too much for audiences. I don't know what the motivations were for the change in it, but it is what it is, and we've got this version now, and we didn't hang out with this version long. We went back to the original Freddy and later movies. At the end of the movie, Nancy and Quentin escape, and they're rescued by police officers and firefighters who are unable to find Kruger's remains. That's very, very swift. At the end of the movie, you hear a guy's voice in the background, one of the firefighters, saying that there's no body in the building. So Freddy, though you think he's dead in the real world, his body has vanished. So they were setting up for more movies, basically, and I can't recall any more movies been made after this remake, but it did do well at the box office. At the end of the movie, after Nancy and her mother return home from the hospital, and this, I have to say, this is an excellent sequence in the movie. If you remember the end of it, of the original Nightmare on Elm Street '84, you had that sequence where the kids are all reunited at the end of the film, and they get into this car convertible, and then the roof goes up, and it's got the stripes of Freddy's jumper on it, and the car drives off with the kids screaming, and then Nancy's mother is dragged through the small window on the door of the house, and it was a very swift and easy cut between the real actress and a dummy getting trailed through this little hole. So, back then, looking at it now, fairly cheesy effect, but at the end of this movie they do something similar. Whenever Nancy and her mother return home from the hospital, Kruger suddenly appears in the mirror. Nancy screams, Kruger breaks the mirror and stabs Nancy's mother through the back of the head, and the blades come out through her eyes and whatnot. And then he drags her into the mirror, and the broken pieces of the mirror, come back up into a fully restored mirror, and it's just Nancy's image left there. So it's a very, very swift little sequence at the end of the movie, but insanely well done. I thought to myself, right, that's probably the best part of the movie. So at the end of the film, of course, they were trying to set it up to take the movie somewhere else. But as I say, this movie seemed to do very, very well whenever it was made. It had its world premiere in Hollywood on April 27th, 2010. It was released theatrically in North America on April 30th, 2010. The film received generally negative reviews from critics who criticised its writing, acting, and the film's lack of depth and apathetic characters. Now that's fair to say. As much as the storyline in this movie is, it goes to some dark places, and you really, really feel for these kids and what they would have went through whenever they were small children, and this version of Freddy Krueger was molesting them whenever they were kids. The acting in this movie, although it's okay, but it's, in all fairness, there's quite a few of the characters in this movie that you just don't care about. You really don't. A lot of the characters in the original film, like, I really, really did genuinely connect with, and throughout all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but in this movie, not so much. Despite all this criticism from reviewers and critics, it was praised for Bayer's direction and faithfulness to the 1984 film. It grossed over 36 million at the domestic box office and over 117 million worldwide, which made it the highest grossing film in the franchise. But I think, I can't say this for anything solid or definite. I think the reason it didn't go any further than this was because of that change to the character of Freddy Krueger. Like, the celebrity status that Freddy Krueger had throughout the other movies is what the real appeal of those movies really were. And this darker version of Freddy Krueger, I just don't think had it too close to home with the fans in the long run. Like, as I say, it was actually ended up being the highest grossing movie in the series, but that would be the case anyway. If you're going to reboot something as popular as A Nightmare on Elm Street, everybody's going to go and see it, just to see what sort of job people do with it. It doesn't mean the film's actually a good film. It just means that people were curious to see what they were going to do with it. But that's the biggest downside to the movie system currently, in the way it is that they're always depending on these opening weekend numbers and whatnot, the domestic box office and the worldwide box office in that first week, 2-week period. But as I say, people are going to go and check. People would have went to check this film out just to see if they screwed it up or not. So, it's the long run on these things, whether it was going to work or not. So, yes, this film is alright, but as I say, in my mind, I prefer the original Freddy over this new Freddy. And yes, of course we did get Freddy back in Freddy vs. Jason, so it's all good. So I'm just curious to see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments of this podcast. If you're not following it yet, please do that. Rate and review, all that sort of good stuff. Share it along to anybody you think would be interested in checking out the show. And that's going to do it for tonight. So guys, until the next episode, stay safe and be good. This has been a production